Li Jian stands there, chest heaving, blood trickling down his cheek. He's out of breath and looking rough. Why is he always in these messes? But right now, he's just catching his breath, clearing his mind. Suddenly, he sees a comforting smile. Is this a memory, maybe? Someone who once meant the world to him. Hey, Li Jian! A woman's voice calls out. He's in a cafe, across from her. You shouldn't space out when someone is in front of you, she says with a grin. He snaps back to the present. Tanks line up, rumbling ominously. Soldiers, jittery and on edge, appear ready for something big. Li Jian's all by himself, against this massive force. Around him, bodies lie scattered. His mind races. I'm sorry, he mutters, facing the inevitable. The command is loud and clear. Fire! Chaos erupts. Explosions echo, fire blooms in the sky. But Jian, he's got power and starts to unleash it. His eyes glow with a fierce light, and he's moving like a force of nature, putting all his energy to a stomp on the ground. This stomp creates a wave of energy. Shards of rock rise up from the ground and completely annihilate his enemies. This is Li Jian, and he is unstoppable. We leave the chaos and go back in time. To the earth in its younger days. A bright sunrise reminding him of his beginnings. How would you define me? Jvin asks introspectively. At one time, he was a fish swimming through a river. Another time, he was an eagle, soaring the skies. Once, he was an ant in a massive colony. There was also a time when he was a big, solitary dinosaur. From the time that the earth was molten, to the time it froze, and then finally to the time that it sprouted in green. He was born, lived, died, and reborn countless times. He has lived the lives of many creatures. He remembers them all, each life imprinted on his soul. Then, he recalls a memory of a thunderous bang. An elephant falls to the ground with a large thud. Not again! He exclaims. He was going to die at their hands once again. Humans, the one species he's learned to loathe over countless lifetimes. Their smug faces reflecting a primitive pride at the destruction of life. In this eternal dance of rebirth, he has met death naturally. Sometimes, he dies at the hands of stronger creatures. But humans were different. They killed not for survival, but for amusement. The speed at which they evolved their killing methods shocked him. He has been killed 1,000 times by humans. And he hates them intensely. The sun dips lower, casting long shadows over his reflections. He's been through countless rebirths, yet the same haunting questions cling to him at the end of every life. What will I be next? This persistent thought echoes inside him. Perhaps the cycle of lives won't ever release its grip. Why must he be reborn again? The dread of this eternal loop feels overwhelming. When will this all end? His consciousness flickers, the finality seems inevitable. In the silence, he pleads, I don't want to be reborn again. Yet the universe disagrees. A luminous pulse throbs through the darkness. He feels the spark ignite once more, life insists on beginning anew. The cycle painfully jostles him awake. His very essence groans under the force of creation. Energy swirls, and he can feel the formation of a familiar yet strange body. He's sure of one thing, the depth of this pain signals that he must be a mammal. Despite the multitude of existences he's endured, this level of agony is unprecedented. Yet, curiously, it fills him with a fervor for what's next. A fresh start beckons, offering a peculiar excitement amid the torment. His experiences have taught him a paradox. The harsher the burst's pain, the higher his species in the food chain. Light strips swirl into focus, and he contemplates time itself. How long has it really been? Suddenly, a newborn's gasp announces his arrival. He feels the sting of cold air, a sharp contrast against the gentle, comforting touch holding him. He blinks, vision still fuzzy, and understands the undeniable truth of his new form. A warm face, tear-streaked and tired, gazes down at him with overwhelming love. The species I loathe, he recognizes. There's no denying it, he's been reborn as the very thing he despises the most. A human. Li Jian! Someone calls out his name. Here, his mother replies to the nurse. This is the first time in all the lives he's lived that he has a name. Outside, people go about their daily business in the city. Here's the thing about humans, Jian muses, they complicate everything. They divide and distinguish themselves based on nationality and race and many other things. They name everything in the world and add meaning to it. Inside the doctor's clinic, the doctor reassures Jian's mother that everything's normal with Jian, but she presses on. She's restless. Why is little Jian still not speaking? His mother continues that he doesn't respond when she talks to him, and he didn't even cry when he was born. The doctor suggests it might be psychological, and his mother's frustration peaks. The doctor recommends that they see a psychiatrist. But his mother won't have it. Psych ward? she exclaims, practically on fire. "Are you saying that my son is crazy?" Giant listens to his mother argue with the doctor. His mother's name is Oh Youngshil. She was an uneducated woman and had a sad fate. First, she lost her parents to war. And then, in another war, she lost her husband. She was left all alone with a newborn baby. The world was too cruel to her. But she fights through it all, selling veggies and whatever else it takes to make sure her baby survived. Night falls, and Giant lays beside her, calm beneath his mother's hand. She once heard from somewhere that telling a baby good things will help them become a good person. And even if Giant never responded, she always told him how much she loved him. Giant could not understand what it meant, but he could feel the warmth of it. He doesn't mind, because there's comfort in her words. This was something that he had never experienced before. The calm of the night wraps around them as something stirs. Giant listens closely. Ribbits and croaks pierce the air, but it suddenly stops. A person sprints through the night, chased by several others. He trips and falls, landing hard. He falls to the ground, and the other men catch up to him. He shouts at them to let him go. "What are you saying? How can we let a communist go?" One of the men glares at him. The man fiercely denies this, and they tell him they'll work it out during the investigation. The leader looks up suddenly. He sees Giant illuminated under the moonlight, at the top of a pole, looking down at them with expressionless eyes. The group below looks up stunned. "That little boy," someone mutters in disbelief. Giant's mind is only thinking about one thing. "Get down, kid," the leader tells him. Giant ignores him, and thinks, "Adult humans. They will make the perfect test subjects." The leader's eyes widen. Giant leaps from the pole and glides down. "Frog," he thinks, and steadily lands on the ground, just like a frog. The people are freaking out like, "What the heck just happened?" They're all staring like he just fell from the sky. Suddenly, Giant's got this crazy electric aura, and lightning bolts erupt from his feet. He zooms towards them, like some kind of human rocket, glowing brighter than anyone should in the middle of the night. "Cheetah," he calls out in his mind. Meanwhile, the group of people watching is absolutely dumbstruck. Giant's eyes light up with this supernatural glow. He clenches his fist. One of the guys starts to pull out a gun. But Giant's not fazed. The word Argentinosaurus flashes through his brain. Giant charges in, landing a powerful punch. The dude with the gun gets sent flying, knocked out cold. The leader is left standing, jaw on the floor, like, "What the hell just happened?" Giant looks almost serene, standing amidst the chaos. Yeah, now he's sure. This is an entirely new phenomenon that's never happened in any of his past lives. He's standing there, soaking it all in with this quiet intensity. In this reincarnation, he was born with the powers of all his past lives. Questions are swirling around in his head, though. But why? No answers? Not yet. Just instincts and gut feelings driving him forward. And there's also another sensation he can't ignore. He feels it coming, feels the culmination of everything. He feels that this is going to be the end of a long line of reincarnations. He turns slightly contemplative. There's a finality to it all. This will be his last life. Back on the dirt road, the leader who's barely keeping it together lashes out. He's frustrated, afraid, practically shouting at this child who's somehow more than a child. Yet Giant simply stands there, calm amid the panic. He turns to face his adversary, listening to anger-fueled breathing and feeling every moment, every beat of his steady heart. This is what Giant has been waiting for. A small smile creeps across his face. There's a sense of peace in the knowledge that this is his last life and he can finally die. As Giant stands over the fallen man, the others watch him with shock and horror. Giant fidgets with his finger, observing the dead goon. The other man, that was being chased, is terrified. Giant remains unperturbed, standing firm in that strangely red outfit. Suddenly his eyes dart to the side. The thug leader yells, flinging a punch wildly, and Giant is thrown to the ground. He pauses for a moment trying to understand what just happened. The leader, now out of breath, watches him. He's shocked when Giant struggles to pick himself up. "If I'm not concentrating, my body is just like any other humans," he analyzes. The thug flinches seeing Giant massage his face as if it was nothing. Giant turns with cold, emotionless eyes. The thug's in disbelief. "What the?" he mutters as fear cascades over him. He goes in for another punch. But Giant is prepared this time. There's a heavy bash. The thug's reaction is like he's seen a ghost. His hand hangs useless in front of him. It looks broken. The thug collapses, wailing. It's not a pretty picture. "Turtle," says Giant in his mind, his eyes glowing an eerie blue. Suddenly, he grabs the thug by the neck. The thug is powerless as Giant squeezes. The thug trembles, eyes bugging out as if the world's closing in. Chimpanzee, Jian whispers, as he harnesses the chimpanzee's strength in his grip. There's an aura around him, fierce and unwavering. The thug loses consciousness, life draining from his eyes. Jian realizes that if he concentrates hard enough, he can be anything he wants. His eyes glow fiercer from this realization. Suddenly, a few bangs ring through the air. One of the men has picked up the gun and has fired at him. One bullet hits Jian's side. Jian stares blankly at the man, whose face is just pure terror. Jian begins to feel weak and falls to the ground. I let my guard down, he thinks. A few seconds pass, but Jian doesn't get up. The man, hands still trembling, lowers the gun and eventually drops it, feeling that the danger has passed. He can barely hold in his terror anymore, and he bolts, screaming his head off. Seeing this, the last of the goons also decides to run, leaving Jian motionless on the ground right next to the other bodies. The sun begins to rise the next day. Suddenly, there's a flicker of life. Jian's finger twitches. Through the haze, he pushes himself, slowly, painfully. With exhaustion draped over his slight frame, Jian struggles to get up. But it's too much, and he flops back to the ground. I got shot by that weird thing again. His thoughts stir. He reaches for his wound, sticky and raw. He muses that his organs have ruptured. Am I going to die? He asks himself. He looks up at the sky, waiting for his death to arrive. But suddenly, his body stiffens and then rises. He starts to wriggle and twitch, and his wound slowly begins to heal and close up. And then he springs up like a daisy in spring, surprising even himself. Then, with a big heave, he vomits a clear liquid. He retches until everything is purged. Sea cucumber. He thinks weakly in his mind. Jian rises from the ground. I survived, he murmurs, clutching at his wounded side. He's a bit annoyed that he didn't die yet. His survival instincts must have kicked into gear at the last minute. But he's also a bit amused. He's never experienced this before and it fuels his curiosity. This body was so small but so powerful that it didn't make sense. But then again, when has his existence ever made sense? He suddenly hears something. He can hear her voice desperately calling his name. She's calling out, voice filled with panic. The neighbors come out of their houses to see what the commotion was. Jian! She shouts. She's so full of fear and panic at the thought of losing her child. But Jian only stares. It doesn't affect him at all. He turns toward a scarecrow and notices a sparrow perched on it. The bird chirps, blissfully ignorant. Without warning, Jian darts forward and snatches it with uncanny dexterity. He lands softly, his mouth stuffed with his feathered prize. I'm not fully grown yet, but I can be self-sufficient if I try, he thinks while munching. There's no need to stay with her. An image of young Shil flashes through his mind, and her voice whispering, I love you. Deep down, a hint of longing surfaces. He turns toward where young Shil was. But eventually, he turns his back and decides to set off on his own. Back in the village, young Shil is heartbroken and cries out for her son. 4 days pass, and Jian has been walking the whole time. He looks dehydrated and weak. His legs finally give way and he falls to the ground with a thud. Exhaustion claims his body, yet his mind remains active. He feels feverish and like his stomach is tied up in knots. Was it something he ate? He wonders. He thinks about his diet the last few days. Humans were supposed to be omnivorous, weren't they? So what was the problem? He's experienced it many times, but he can never get used to this feeling. He knew he was dying. It's okay, he tells himself. He has no regrets, he thinks as the world slowly turns dark around him. He's ready to face his last death, but then, he hears a rustle of leaves. Someone was approaching. A figure steps out from the woods. It was young Shil. Oh, Jian thinks. He was not expecting this at all. Jian stares at her weakly, as she calls out with undeniable force. Jian! She runs to him, wrapping him in a fierce embrace. She rocks him gently, cradling both the boy and his tattered resolve. He was just an inch from death, but his mind was getting clearer. Hunger grips him. He wants the food that she makes for him. She's loud, he thinks to himself. How much longer is she going to do this? Stop it and give me food. It was at that moment that Jian wanted nothing more than to make her laugh instead of cry. He did not know what they meant, but he spoke human words for the first time in his life. Her eyes widen and the tears stop. He spoke the words that young Shil always told him with a warm smile. I love you, Jian says. Her face scrunches up, ready to cry again. Jian smiles at her weakly. But against his intentions, the uneducated and unfortunate young Shil, no, Jian's mother, cried and cried for a long time. Jian rests softly against her, his face is battered, yet there's a quiet peacefulness in his gaze. That day, staring at the sunset while wrapped in his mother's tight embrace, Jian thinks that this sunset, among all the other sunsets in all his other lifetimes, was the most extraordinary and beautiful sunset of all. Let's stay like this for a bit longer. Just until I can survive on my own, Jian thinks. We jump into a police station interrogation room. Some dude's trying to convince the cops a little boy caused all this chaos. He's swearing up and down that he killed the kid. The detectives are grilling him, wanting to know how only Detective An's corpse ended up at the scene. What happened to the kid? The man didn't have an answer for that. The man tells the detective that he was sure he shot him. That's right. You shot Detective An. His interrogator counters. The man vehemently denies this. He pleads to the other detective at the scene. Why are you just standing there? Say something. It's the other detective. He's in a neck brace and an arm cast. But the detective just freezes him out with silence. Who's believing this story? Apparently nobody. The room's about as hot as it can get before the detective loses his cool and says to deal with him. The accused is hauled out, shouting why the detective was doing this. The investigators aren't buying the story about a little boy killer. The man insists that the boy killed Detective An and he killed the boy. One of them lights up a cigarette, dismissing the hysteria. The detective stares at the prisoner. Looks like he's got something to hide. Days pass after the incident, and life goes back to normal. But Jian notices that ever since that day, Young Shil always held his hand tightly so she wouldn't lose him again. Her grip is warm, her smile comforting. He did not mind all that Young Shil did for him, and that thought really scared him. The years pass, and it's time for Jian to go to school. You beat my boy up? A woman yells. It's Young Shil scolding her son's bullies. The teacher tries to calm her down, but she's having none of it. If you want kids to fight, then let your own kids fight, she screams at the teacher. She now turns to the bullies and threatens to snap their wrists off if they ever do it again. As he watches his mother, Jian comes to the conclusion that Young Shil was only ever kind to him. Another time, there were two elderly ladies gossiping about Jian. Young Shil overhears all of this and loses it, flames of fury practically shooting from her eyes. She's defending Jian like a lioness, telling them to quit talking trash. And still another time, at the market, Young Shil is fighting again. She rants about the country's injustices, claiming they've taken everything from her. And now they want to take her business. Jian watches as she tells the men that they are going to starve if she can't sell her vegetables there. Suddenly, she drops to the ground, daring them to kill her. Jian ponders how Young Shil fought everything in the world, every day. Flash forward, and time's passing like a breeze through the field of daisies. Jian is trying life on the human side, adapting bit by bit. They're at a field of daisies, and Young Shil asks Jian if she looks pretty. Jian just stares while Young Shil smiles at him. She stands with a gentle smile, extending a reassuring hand towards Jian. Her eyes speaking volumes. It was always like this every time Jian thinks about leaving. Young Shil's warm hand reaches out to his, making it very hard to leave. Jian suddenly pauses his innocent eyes full of curiosity. He can't help but ask, "Why do you fight every day?" Young Shil pauses, trying to find the right words. "To protect you," she answers, her voice firm. Jian looks at her, those words cementing a bond that nothing seems capable of breaking. Suddenly, the wind picks up, playfully snatching the daisy from Young Shil's hair. She grins as it floats away. "Let's head back," she suggests warmly. "I'll cook something special for you." Jian realizes that the one thing he hoped never to happen, finally did. He wants to stay by Young Shil's side. As they walk, a figure looms in the distance. The man crouches, grasping the fallen daisy, eyes narrowing as he watches them leave. His presence is dark, foreboding. "Found you, you monster," he murmurs, a sinister edge to his voice. It's the detective from a long time ago. Jian glances back, as if sensing an unseen shadow. His gaze is set. Whatever comes, he's not ready to part with Young Shil just yet. Survival of the fittest. It's the ruthless law of the jungle. The weak fall to the strong. There's no escape from this unending cycle. It's seen as the natural order of life. But not all deaths are easy to swallow. Take this, for example. This one was killed for a human to overcome the heat. This one was killed to overcome the cold. This one was killed in the name of science and innovation. This one was killed to carry money. This one for bragging rights. And sometimes, even for boredom. It's pathetic, Jian thinks, while staring at the humans down below. Still, life keeps turning. Jian is now 12 years old. He's fishing for food from the stream. He has assimilated into human society. His neighborhood has been changing rapidly over the years. Roads were built, and buildings began to grow taller and taller. However, it's not all sunshine and development. Industrial smoke rises, polluting what was once a crystal-clear stream. Factories by the river outside his home paint a stark picture of progress. Giant arrives at his house. Inside, Youngshil lies in bed, unwell. It's mealtime. Giant takes a bite of food, and immediately a frown sets in. He spits his food out, much to Youngshil's confusion. "Why'd you spit it out? Does it have bones?" she quizzes. His instinct just rebels against it. Youngshil scolds Giant. She explains that these fish aren't easy to catch, urging Youngshil not to be a picky eater. Giant can't be convinced to eat. "No," he says. Youngshil is momentarily flustered but shrugs it off. "Fine, it's your loss," she says. She starts eating Giant's share. Giant looks on, and in hindsight ponders that he should have stopped her from eating it too. After the meal, Youngshil is back in bed, and Giant is tending to her. Youngshil watches him and gives him a brave smile, but Giant doesn't smile back. He stands up and Youngshil asks, "Are you going to school?" Giant only nods. "Enjoy your day, my boy," she warmly wishes. Outside, back in a bustling town, life moves forward. People interact, vendors call out, children run around. It's a scene of vibrant normalcy. In one corner of town, Giant has set up a stand and is selling apples. He ponders many things while selling. Humans have destroyed the land for convenience's sake, and that development is now eating away at them, just like the rot on this apple. Why does Youngshil have to bear the cost of all these changes? He reflects, as he drops the bruised apple among a pile of healthier ones. Out of nowhere, a hand reaches out to touch an apple. "They look delicious," a man says and asks how much they are. 10 won, Youngshil replies. The man bites into one with a loud crunch, remarking how expensive it is while savoring the taste. The rules humans make, like laws, are supposed to keep things in check but often just mask differences. In the past, he broke a rule, an unbreakable one. Murder. Giant stares into the eyes of the detective. His eye flashes in recognition. The detective tells him he wanted to stop by earlier, but he wanted to see how monsters like him grew up. He's got that mocking smirk, asking Giant why he was pretending to be human. Giant remains silent, unfazed. The detective remarks about how Giant still has nothing to say, and orders his men to get him. A crowd has now gathered, curious to see the commotion was, and why they had to lock up a boy in handcuffs. The detective's men wonder if they can really take a boy in like that. The detective declares that he's being arrested for being a spy. Giant remains emotionless. "And if you're a spy," the detective says threateningly, "your mom is also a spy. My men are on their way to your house now." He says this with an evil smile. Giant's eyes widen at this news. The detective cruelly drops that his mom was sick and will probably not endure their interrogation, suggesting torture would be involved. Suddenly, something cracks inside Giant. Energy swirls around him, visible to everyone. The man notices this too, but stays collected, curious yet cautious. "Step away from him. You could die," he warns his lackeys. They exchange looks, confused. With a forceful stomp, Youngshil shatters the ground. The street rumbles, leaving the crowd bewildered and unsure. What kind of power are they witnessing? Amidst the chaos, the man's grin suggests he's intrigued rather than frightened. Giant leaps into action and launches himself, quickly disappearing in front of the men. The crowd bursts into chatter, disbelief palpable in the air. "Can't you tell?" the detective says calmly. "He a monster," he finishes as they watch Giant running away from them. Giant recognizes him as the man who called him a monster back then. That man has severely underestimated him. He has no clue what Giant is capable of. It was this exact day that humans had triggered a tremendous disaster. We jump forward into the future, in a sprawling city. Li Jian stands lost in the urban jungle. Despite humanity's physical weakness, they hold the top spot on the food chain thanks to one key trait: communication. Precise and detailed communication has enabled humans to form societies and develop at a fast pace. Giant ponders this as he moves through the bustling crowd, almost invisible despite the chaos around him. He reflects that there are words embedded within him too. Words that he can't forget. He recalls his mother's last moments, and wonders if they're a blessing or a curse. We move back to an earlier time in Giant's life. He's running barefoot through a stream, away from the policeman, and towards his mother. His pace quickens, sprinting faster, leaping through the air like a superhero. He lands on a dirt road with a thud. With determination, he activates his legs with a spark, and he sets off again with intense speed. Meanwhile, back at the police station, a pair of detectives are having a smoke. "Are you okay?" one of them asks. They chat about how crazy it is to call a 12-year-old a North Korean spy. They talk about the lieutenant who has put his career on the line, by bringing a huge force to catch the kid. One of them answers that he can understand why. His friend asks why he was against this operation in the first place. He looks at his hand and sees it trembling. He remembers the boy's face and the horrors he witnessed years ago. "It's because I'm scared," he tells his friend. At that moment, in Jian's home, the police have the house surrounded. An order to drag her out echoes through the air. They start knocking at the gate. Jian comes flying in, arriving just in time. He lands behind them with a thud. How did he get here so fast? They turn around and find an exhausted but defiant child. Jian looks up at them with a glare. His presence raises questions. They didn't expect him to just appear out of thin air. Wait, was he the kid who lived in this house? Jian nods. Yes, he's the kid they're looking for. The men are skeptical. Lieutenant Kim might have overreached this time. What can a kid like him really do? The leader orders them to take him in for interrogation. "Hey, you need to come with us, kid," the leader says, towering over him menacingly. Jian clenches his fists. Is he ready for this? Just then, a door slides open to reveal Youngshil, looking weary but fierce. The men all stare at her blankly, not knowing what to do. Her eyes focus on Jian, surrounded by all these men. One of the men says something about Youngshil looking too sick. But orders are orders. The leader tells them to take both Jian and Youngshil. Youngshil stumbles, trying to comprehend. They're taking her boy. Not without a fight. Youngshil gathers every bit of strength she had and yells. She calls to everyone in the village. "We have kidnappers! Please someone help us!" A scuffle breaks out, and Youngshil screams some more. She was practically dying moments ago, but now she looks fine. One of the men mutters. Maybe she really is a spy. Suddenly, someone taps Youngshil on the shoulder. Bam! The slap echoes as Youngshil takes a surprising hit, sending her reeling. Jian's eyes widen at the sight of his mother getting hurt. She staggers but catches herself. Jian feels chills running down his spine. He's boiling with anger from head to toe. The guy who beside him turns to look. Small cracks have appeared under Jian's feet. That last thread of sanity? Gone. Something deep within her snaps. It is over in a few seconds. Bodies are scattered everywhere. Jian's eyes widen as he stands in the dirt, bloody and grim, but with a strange calmness. Youngshil looks at the scene with disbelief. Bodies litter the ground, a testament to a fight they probably didn't expect. Youngshil, on her knees, calls out, "Jian!" her voice breaking. Tears mingle with dirt as she looks at him, a strong yet vulnerable expression. The distance between them seems so great. Jian realizes that he did it again. A vehicle screeches to a stop, dust billowing around it. Laughter comes from the vehicle. It's the lieutenant, thinking he's won some twisted game. Jian turns, his face emotionless, still in rage mode. "What did I say? I told you he's a monster!" The lieutenant triumphantly exclaims, pointing at Jian as the kid just stands there. He warns his men not to get too near or else they'll end up dead. Jian clenches his fist, anger simmering under his calm facade, ready to face off with his next opponents. Suddenly, Youngshil approaches, and puts herself in front of Jian. "I'm the one who killed him!" Youngshil screams, trying to redirect the blame. This fierce woman, who seemed weak moments ago, stands strong, ready to protect. Her voice cracks. "My boy did nothing wrong. It was just me," she screams. The soldiers are surprised. Youngshil, who barely has the strength to keep her food, is now a force, yelling at the top of her lungs to protect her child. Why? Jian wonders to himself. Images of happier times flash through his mind, a past with more sunshine and fewer fears. Jian clutches his chest, overwhelmed, feeling the burn of both anger and love. He looks at Youngshil, desperate and driven to save her child. A tear trails down his cheek. The answer becomes crystal clear in his mind. To protect you. Jian, who had never shed a tear his whole life, now had tears flowing freely down his face, knowing that his mother would lay down her own life just to protect him. "I'm the one who killed him!" Youngshil yells as the men watch on. "My boy did no wrong! It was me!" She keeps yelling, tears streaming down her face. She throws herself in front of Jian, ready to sacrifice herself. The cops are taken aback, stunned by her boldness and ferocity. Amidst it all, young Jian sobs quietly, overcome by his mother's selflessness. Quietly, the lieutenant loads his gun. He prepares to fire, ice cold as he takes aim at Youngshil. At the last second, he aims for her leg instead. Jian stands firm. He must protect Youngshil. The lieutenant smiles a cruel grin. "Let's see," he murmurs ominously. A gunshot splits the air. Youngshil's face is a mix of fear and surprise. A miraculous thing happens. Jian takes the bullet, shielding Youngshil with his own body. His eyes blaze with an unyielding light. The lieutenant laughs gleefully, convinced of his invincibility. "Shoot that woman!" comes the frantic scream. Young Shil and Giant brace against the onslaught. A subordinate resists, telling him they're not resisting. The lieutenant's temper flares. "You idiots!" he roars. He reminds them they're gonna end up like them if they don't do anything. Panic swells amongst his men. "This is an order!" he commands, escalating the chaos. Reluctantly, they follow, guns blazing. But Giant? He stands unwavering, eyes fierce. Young Shil watches with horror. Bullets rain down on them. "I can do this!" Jin's thoughts run like a mantra. He's reaching back across multiple lifetimes, tapping into all of their abilities. Giant reaches out a hand and catches a bullet midair. He's unfazed, even as Young Shil falls beside him. Giant mutters, "I can do this!" The armor of his spirit unyielding. He becomes an impenetrable wall, every bullet bouncing harmlessly away. The word armadillo echoes in his mind, a protective shield. Even more shots ring out, and they're all shocked by Giant's defense. Young Shil gasps, doesn't dare to blink. She sees Giant, huffing from exertion but still defiant, ready for another round. Blood trickles, but Giant's focus doesn't waver. His eyes, blazing with anger, meet the lieutenant's fearful gaze. "What are you waiting for? Keep shooting," the lieutenant orders his men. He spurs them on, barking orders to his faltering crew. Giant gears up for another barrage of bullets. He has no choice, he has to push himself to do it one more time. And suddenly his mother's presence is felt. She jumps in front of Giant and wraps him in her arms. The lieutenant is surprised. Young Shil has now placed herself in the line of fire. Giant's eyes widen with horror. "It's fine, honey," she reassures him tenderly, her voice a balm to his weary soul. Tears form in Giant's eyes as he realizes what's happening. The bullets hit, and Young Shil is thrown back. Powerless to do anything, Giant watches the horror unfold in front of his eyes. Finally, his mother falls to the ground. He's a mess, scratches and blood cover him, and he's trying to get out that one impossible word, Mom. Young Shil is still conscious. She reaches out a hand and touches Giant's cheek. Her eyes slowly flutter open, looking right at him. In Giant's mind, memories flash, a tender moment with his mom, her smile gentle and reassuring. They share a gaze, two souls tied together by love and heartache. His tears fall, one by one, tracing down his cheek, reflecting the agony inside. Slowly, Young Shil's hand lowers and drops, as her last bits of life fade away. Above, the sun sets on another day, and the world turns just like it always has. But for Giant, this day will forever be seared in his memory. Suddenly, there's darkness. And a small drop of water creates ripples. Young Shil opens her eyes. She's somewhere else, a dreamlike realm. Young Shil blinks, confused, thinking, "What is this? Heaven?" She turns and sees a younger Giant before her, crying like the world's ending. But her smile cuts through his storm, soft, warm, just like home. "You were a tough baby, never cried this much," she says, humor soothing the jagged edges of the moment. "But why are you crying now?" Giant crumbles, apologizing for everything. He's confused. He doesn't know what to do. Why does he even have these powers? His mom's death hits him again, guilt crashing over him like a wave. Why did she have to die, when it should have been him? And there she is, embracing him, love unwavering amid his storm. She whispers how having him was her biggest blessing in the world. "Thank you," she says, holding Giant in her embrace. Giant tells her he'll follow her soon. His mother pauses for a moment. She holds his shoulders, giving him her last piece of advice. His mom's steady gaze catches his. "Promise me one thing." Giant's eyes widen, clinging to that moment, listening to his mother's words. Her lips move softly. He nods at his mother's words. Suddenly, he's back in reality, his mother's body cold beside him. "Giant!" His mother's last words echo in the fading light. His grief burns through tears, raw and intense. "Giant, promise me one thing. No matter what happens, no matter what it takes." Chills run down the thug leader's spine while looking at Giant's face. A new, stronger kind of blaze erupts around Giant. "Survive until the end," were his mother's last words, forever etched into his heart, fueling his rage and resolve. Why was the lieutenant so obsessed with Giant? There are multiple reasons, but the answer was simple. Arrogance. Humans are so confident about their abilities to understand everything. So they fear what they can't explain. That's why they try to eliminate anything different. Young Shil now lies lifeless on the ground. Her last words echo. "Survive until the end." Giant feels the loss deeply. He can't do it. He can't fit in and live with these despicable humans. Survive until the end. Sticks like a mantra. to fulfill this wish, he might have to hurt, or even kill humans again. He remembers the dream where Youngshil was comforting him through tears. No matter what it takes, survive until the end, Youngshil tells him. And now, Youngshil is lying dead in front of him. Giant chokes back tears, but determination hardens his face. His enemies recoil in surprise. But suddenly, Giant bolts, leaving the scene behind. His mission's clear: stay alive at all costs. He is going to survive. He lands deftly on the rooftop, casting a defiant look back. Below, the gang freaks out. What the heck are you doing? He's escaping, the lieutenant shouts. They scramble into their vehicles. He's weak right now, the leader insists. It's now or never. Giant just keeps running, a blur against the sunset sky. A car spins into chase mode, tires ripping through wildflowers. But Giant races through the flower fields, with the truck following close behind. Once again, memories of peaceful times with Youngshil among these flowers flash through his mind. Giant keeps on running. The field stretches on endlessly, but he keeps going, until finally, he slows down. As the car closes in, an inevitable confrontation looms. The lieutenant's at the wheel with a crazed look in his eyes. The truck screeches to a stop. The gang taunts him, thinking they've got him cornered. You think I would run? Giant asks. He just couldn't do it at the village, or else his mom would get hurt. He apologizes, hands covering his face. The gang grows uneasy. Why is he apologizing? That person I killed before, and the ones I killed today, and those of you before me who are about to die, they must have mothers. They were all loved, and have loved once, Giant explains. Just like me, he finishes, with a cold look in his eye. The lieutenant sneers, still believing he had the upper hand. Giant acknowledges that he's made some mistakes. But you are exactly the same, he says, unsettling them with raw honesty. He points out that humans kill without self-awareness, and destroy everything. You ruin everything, he says with cold, dead eyes. The goons are confused. They don't know what he means. Giant grows pensive. He's always wondered why he kept getting reincarnated again and again. He's wondered why he was given these powers. But now he understands. The air crackles with an intense energy. Even the goons can feel it. Giant's fists clench tight, streaks of electric blue spiraling around him as raw power gathers. He can feel it deep in his bones. You humans are destructive and good for nothing, he tells them. The ground starts to crack underneath their feet. A whisper of purpose leaves his lips. I exist to bring about the human race's extinction. And with that, the ground beneath him rumbles, sending tremors that crack the earth. Faces contorted in shock and panic, the gang backs off, realizing the true weight of their threat. Not so confident now, are they? The lieutenant looks up. Giant is now up in the air, leaving the trembling gang frozen. Suspended against the backdrop of a blazing sunset, he hurtles back down like a comet. The gang leaders scream, loud and guttural, echoes as Giant crashes down like a hammer, a resounding kaboom, marking his arrival. A few minutes later, the jeep lies overturned and smoldering. The scene is littered with the defeated, their bodies covered in blood and dust. As the sky wears a hue of twilight, Giant approaches. He looks down at the carnage. As the gang leader lies bloodied and beaten, he gasps. I knew it. I was right. You have to die. Even now, he calls Giant a monster, insisting he should never have existed. Giant, expression inscrutable, acknowledges the truth in their words without flinching. He steps closer to the lieutenant. You're right. You should have killed me, he mutters. The lieutenant looks up at him, gasping for air. Standing before the fallen leader, he leans in, words sharp and cutting. But you failed. And for that reason, Giant begins, while raising his hand. The lieutenant's eyes bulge in horror. Not a single human in this world will be left alive. The lieutenant screams in horror. As the blow lands, the noise echoes loud and final, thwack. It's nighttime now. In the dark solitude, Giant walks. He carries a figure gently in his arms, his steps deliberate, under the moon's watchful eye. Youngshil rests cold against his small frame. Lost, without direction, Giant trudges on. Perhaps it was because of exhaustion, but he could almost hear Youngshil's voice whispering through the night. Scenes flash through his mind, memories of a gentle smile, words of comfort, warmth shared in another life, and finally, he remembers the day he was born. He's heard these words from her 1,000 times throughout his life. I love you. And it was then, in the dark solitude, that he finally responds, me too. The Giant trudges through grass, feet stained and worn. A dark depression has settled upon him. He thinks about the 10 years he spent with his mother. Time meant little to someone who's lived eternally. Yet, those years held everything. His mother, her love was a gift he'd never known before. It was the happiest he had ever been in all his existence. Right now, each step is heavy with grief. He can't help but blame himself for her death. No life, or death, had ever been this painful. His mother's words echo. Survive until the end. Her voice, still a guiding comfort. He pauses, but knows he must move forward. Each step, a reluctant obedience to her last wish. Okay, he murmurs quietly, and faces another day. The days pass and winter comes. A hunter lies in the snow, rifle in hand. A pheasant sits unaware, inviting the hunter's aim. With a sharp raise, the hunter's about to seal its fate. A loud bang, the bird's flight turns fatal. The hunter laughs, victory in his voice. Then, something odd. Giant stands there. The hunter is confused, startled by this boy in a rugged state. Hey kid, the hunter calls out. How did you get here? These are hunting grounds and it's dangerous. Giant remains silent, observing the lifeless pheasant. First time seeing one? The hunter asks, excited by his catch. Giant coldly questions his pride. A twitch in Giant's hand signals something stirring. His eyes glow with an otherworldly light. Where are you parents? He asks, oblivious to what was happening. Giant's shoulders sink as memories rush back. They're dead. He finally responds in a small voice. The hunter, quiet, takes a step closer. Well, it's winter, he says and wraps his coat around the boy. Curiosity and concern tug at him. Aren't you cold? Giant is speechless at the unexpected kindness. The hunter takes Giant's hand. Let's go to my house, he says. They head home, a modest house nestled in snow. Mother! I'm back, announces the hunter. She braved the cold to greet them. He scolds his mother for being outside when it's too cold. But first things first, the boy needs a bath. You stink, he quips. Inside, a warm meal awaits. Pheasant sizzles on the grill. This looks great. They chat, eager to dig in. Giant sits quietly. Loud noises break the moment. Construction sounds, the hunter explains, from the mountain next to them. Risotto or something? Giant, deep in thought, barely registers it. Suddenly curious, the hunter asks Giant about his journey. How'd you climb all the way to the top of our mountain? Giant just says I walked. Simple. Honest. The hunter nods, assessing the situation. There's nothing here, he admits. It wasn't a good environment for a kid to grow up in. Plans form to bring Giant to the village at the bottom of the mountain. They'll find someone to take Giant so he can go to school. Giant eats slowly, savoring the warmth and normalcy. The hunter gently scolds him, playful but firm. With a wide grin, he jokes that maybe they'll teach him some manners in school. Giant stands there, eyes wide. He doesn't say a word, just absorbing it all. The night sky spreads above, deep blue and dotted with stars, casting a serene but chilly vibe over the hunter's house. Giant stares at the photos scattered around the house. A husband and wife, looking formal and stiff, holding a baby. The next image is brighter, a father and his son setting off while the mother watches, smiling. A formal portrait of the man, wearing a suit, looking all serious. Lastly, it's the hunter and his mother, together. But now they're fast asleep. The hunter is sprawled out, snoring away without a care. His mother snoozes peacefully on the other side. Giant's just staring at the box beside the man's portrait. He's all tucked in, nice and cozy, between the hunter and the granny. This is a new feeling for Giant, and he takes everything in. The next morning, they're all outside, preparing to set out for the village. The hunter and granny exchange glances. It's a little too long, the hunter observes. They've dressed Giant up in some old clothes, but they're a bit too big. The hunter chuckles, kneeling to roll up pants. Here, let's fold it. Like this, he demonstrates with a soft touch. Giant's eyes briefly soften, a hint of gratitude masked by his usual stoic demeanor. All right. We're ready. Let's go, the hunter announces, as they prepare to leave. He turns to his mom, assuring, Mother, we'll be back soon. His smile is warm, hopeful. She waves them off. Giant follows closely, eyes reflecting the sky that's starting to grumble. It seems nature has different plans for today. They walk along the snow-covered road, each step crunching underfoot. Giant, deep in thought, suddenly asks, Your mother, she doesn't seem to talk very much, sir. The man laughs heartily, giving Giant's head a playful rub. Come on, kiddo. So you knew how to talk politely? Giant rolls his eyes but remains silent. Beneath his calm facade, there's a flurry of curiosity. She can't talk, the man admits, his expression momentarily serious. It's because she's deaf. Jin furrows his brow. If she can't hear, why do you keep talking to her? Even though she can't hear what I'm saying, it seems like she understands what my heart is trying to say to her. The man shrugs softly. And that's all he really needs, actually? Giant ponders the man's words. Just then, raindrops begin to fall, slowly at first, but rapidly escalating into a downpour. Oh no, it's raining! The man exclaims, a hint of worry in his voice. The rain shows no signs of letting up. He suggests they find cover, leading Giant to a nearby shelter. Both of them were unaware that they were right underneath the construction site. Who would have expected rain like this in winter? The man remarks as they waited out in the small cave. Suddenly, the earth trembles. Too many trees were cut down for the development, leaving the ground unstable. It gives way, a sudden, violent collapse, right on top of where Giant and the hunter were sheltering. The landslide is over in minutes. In the aftermath, they find that the man is pinned underneath the landslide. Giant was luckier as he was thrown a few meters away. The man coughs, spitting out mud and rainwater. He's bleeding really badly. Are you okay? The man's voice asks, barely audible over the storm, putting Giant's safety over his. Panic fuels Giant as he dashes towards the man. He digs frantically, mud flying everywhere. Oh dear! The man sighs weakly. Giant yells, Hold on! I'll get you out of here soon, sir! But the man is fading, his breath shallow. Mother! He gasps, calling out for his mother during his last moments. Giant looks on in shock. His head droops, spirit waning. Giant stands frozen, helpless under the deluge. The rain continues unabated, a relentless drumbeat on the earth. Giant stops digging. He knows it's futile. He remembers what the man was telling him. That there was construction going on over at the next mountain. He stares up with sadness at the sky. The man's voice echoes back to him. What did they call it? Risotto? The storm shows no sign of stopping. Giant slowly trudges along the muddy path, with the hunter's body on his back. He clutches his coat tighter, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. Somewhere up the road, a lone figure stands. It's the grandmother, waiting for their return, umbrellas in hand. Her eyes widen in shock as she takes in the scene. Her steady gaze lands on her son. The umbrella slips from her fingers, hitting the ground. At that moment, the rest of the world fades away, except for her son and the boy. It's the day after the storm. The sun is out and the skies are clear. At the house, Giant is quiet, lost in his thoughts. He stares out the window, mind swirling with the previous day's events. His eyes close, shutting out the world for a moment. Memories surface of the policemen at the village, the rage he felt towards them, and their final destruction. If he were to be honest with himself, he was just venting his anger that day, when he made a vow to eliminate every single human in the world. He was still thinking about it. But something keeps him hesitating. He wasn't sure if it was the right thing to do. He ponders some more and another memory surfaces. It was a memory of his mom looking at his exam paper, which was left completely blank. His mom's not taking it well, asking if he's illiterate like her. Giant, in his usual cool demeanor, just says, I didn't know the answer, so I left it blank. Her advice? Just write something, anything. Giant replies that he did not know the right answer. Then comes a moment of quiet understanding between them. Back to the present, Giant stares at the clear skies. Looks like he's made up his mind. Meanwhile, somewhere at the next mountain, was the opening of a brand new, flashy resort, or risotto as the hunter called it. Snip goes the ribbon and applause fills the space. There's a crowd of reporters there today, and the owners are putting out their best to impress. A big shot in a fancy coat shakes hands, looking confident, but hey, something catches his eye. What's that? He asks, looking at a tiny figure in the distance. A kid? Here? Now? The big shot's not pleased, and tells security to hustle the kid out. The security guy runs to block his way, telling him to scram. But wait, something stops the guy in his tracks. Behind Giant is a trail of blood, leading to the mangled bodies of other security guards. Giant's deep in thought, his mom's voice echoes in his mind. Even if you don't know the answer, solve the question. With a warm smile, she says, Who cares if you get 0 points? It's okay to be wrong. This advice was his guide for his decision now. The guard stumbles back in horror. If you really can't figure it out, just solve the question however you want to. Echoes his mom's voice. Giant has made up his mind. He's done with hesitating. The guard is in a panic sweat now. But Giant, he's calm as ever, with a chilling promise. I will kill you all. No hesitation now, his earlier resolve spins into a grim determination. To be really honest, this is what he really wanted to do in the first place. A few hours pass and Giant stands on a ledge. Blood-stained and determined, he surveys the town below, knowing each day he gets stronger. His thoughts are intense. Extinction, he murmurs to himself, understanding the weight of his mission. He knows it's no easy task, but he's ready to face it head-on. His hands, still red from battle, hang by his side, a stark reminder of what's necessary. In a flashback, we see the chaos left behind, a mass of fallen foes, a testament to his resolve. Jian stands alone, heightening his determination with a single thought, that he can do what must be done. Shifting to the calm of the mountains, sunlight creeps over the landscape, a gentle contrast to the previous carnage. There's a grave with a photo of the hunter, and next to it was another grave, the hunter's mother. The shock of her son's death was too much, and she passed away in her sleep not long after. Jian takes in his memories of them, their weight turning into fuel for thought. Sitting there, he figures out his next move. First, he needs to test the extent of his powers. Right now, he knows he holds the collective strength from his past lives, and he can be anything he wanted. The only problem is, when he stops concentrating, his body becomes just a normal human body. He needs to step up his game. Fast forward one crazy year later, a train is approaching. Jian's about to challenge this train head-on, just to test himself. The conductor freaks out at what he sees ahead. It's Jian, unyielding in the middle of the tracks. With a whistle blast slicing through the air, the train barrels toward him. But he's not flinching. The train screeches, the conductor's scream reverberates, as Jian remains calm despite the impending impact. Then wham! The collision scene is nuts. Jian is thrown high into the air, and lands with a sickening crash. The train driver rushes out to save the boy, but he's surprised. He looks everywhere for him, but he's disappeared. Jian, meanwhile, is already at a distance, walking away. He had just harnessed the power of a limpet shell's teeth, and trained himself to maintain it even when he's not focusing. One more year passes. Jian now has the ability to communicate with other creatures. It wasn't words, though, it was more like telepathy. He was able to understand them on a deeper level. What's strange was that, being in a human body played the biggest role in developing this sixth sense. Most creatures in this earth have an affinity towards humans. Which was really a mystery. But then things fast forward again, 5 years later. Jian has grown into an adult now. This grown version of Jian has hit his prime. He's matured into this powerhouse, looking fierce and ready. He wants to remain in this state for as long as he can. So he's used his powers as a turtle to make that happen. But guess what? Time flies. Another 10 years pass, and the world isn't what it used to be. Heavy smoke billows from factories, darkening the sky. What a mess! The rivers are choked with plastic waste, a sad testament to human excess. Yet, amid this despair, nature seems to hold its breath, hopeful against the odds. Now, Jian's communication skills have expanded greatly. His connection with nature isn't just with animals anymore, it's with earth, water, even plants. He can feel it, deep inside. Living souls are ingrained in even the simplest objects. He's connected to the entire planet. He can feel it. It's suffering. It's dying. He looks out over a modern city, confronted by human progress clashing with nature, but he wasn't ready just yet. Another 30 years pass. Jian's journey has been about mastering his powers. Years of relentless training have expanded his abilities. And there was no limit to what he could accomplish. Furthermore, he had found a way to combine all his different powers. His eyes burned with blue intensity because he knew, finally, that his preparations were almost complete. Is it finally time? He wonders to himself. Yes, he thinks. Now is the time to act. On top of his mountain, surrounded by a lush forest, Jian meditates silently, feeling his power. Flames burst forth from the ground, igniting beneath his feet. He's channeling immense power, combining heat with more heat, causing pressure. If he repeats this enough times, he is able to cause an earthquake. Jian recalls his past, a major quake he had already triggered before. The world map flashes, pinpointing 6 locations where he can shake the earth like that again. Once the earthquakes are triggered, this will split the continents into 42 fragments, and half will sink under the sea. Standing amidst the wreckage in his mind, he assures himself that no human could ignore this disaster. This will be the end of the human race. A chilling vision is shown of him standing atop a mountain of skulls. He can't explain it, but he has a feeling that this is exactly what will happen. He looks up at the sky. He knows humans won't be the only ones wiped out. Many other species will be driven to extinction. But still, this is something that he has to do. He must do it, even if it's difficult. His thoughts wander to the humans living in the city below. He's been alone for decades. He wonders if he should take one last look at how humans have been living recently, but he swiftly contradicts himself. Nah, he's watched humans for ages, nothing new. But his eyes suddenly flicker with memories, glimpses of his mother, and the kind hunter who gave him shelter. Maybe he should have a look anyway. I can always start the extinction anytime I want, he convinces himself. He extinguishes the flames from his feet, and the ground stops rumbling. He's in no rush as he slowly walks toward human civilization. The destruction of the human race will have to wait another day. Elsewhere, a boat sails silently over the water. Soon, he's on a beach, but it's littered with careless human leftovers. He's in a lush forest, but it's still full of humans. He realizes that no matter where he goes, no place has managed to escape the touch of humans. He's alone on the road, steps echoing in the quiet night. This road was also the same. There was once a forest filled with the smell of acacia here, but now it's gone. He halts abruptly. He's changed his mind. Frustration and annoyance at what humans were doing, he thinks about just ending them all right then. But suddenly, a loud honk cuts through. Lights flash in front of him, coming fast, but he doesn't flinch. That sound isn't natural. It wasn't supposed to exist in this world. His eyes glow with fierce blue energy. Suddenly, like lightning, he shatters the road between them. A driver screeches to avoid the chaos. Above, he dislodges a large boulder and sends it hurtling down toward the car. Jian watches with indifference as the car loses control. As the car screeches closer, the driver's face comes into focus. Confusion hits as Jian's eyes widen. What's happening? A simple flower enters his vision. What do you think? A familiar voice asks him. He's in so much shock. I'm pretty, right? Says Youngshil in his memories, placing a daisy in her hair. The woman in the car looks exactly like Youngshil, his beloved mother. Jian is speechless. But the boulder is almost about to hit her car. Jian springs into action. He bolts forward, punching through the rock with raw power. The rock splits in two, and Jian lands on the roof. The driver clenches the steering wheel tight, trying to take control of the car. She opens her eyes for a peek, and the unexpected happens. Someone's face pops out, looking at her upside down. The driver lets out a scream. Up above, another massive boulder is threateningly perched on a cliff, teetering on the edge. The massive rock plummets, aimed straight for the car. Wham! It hits Jian square on the head. The driver recoils in shock. Jian is caught off guard, and the impact sends him into shock. The sound of screeching tires fills the air as the car brakes violently. The sudden braking sends Jian tumbling a few meters in front. The driver swings the door open, rushes to the fallen Jian. Jian can't believe this is happening. He's managed to maintain his abilities unconsciously, but seeing his mom's face again made him lose control. The woman dashes over, adrenaline kicking her into high gear. She kneels down, checking on him. She looks like she's yelling something, but Jian could only think about how like they looked. Jian's eyes flicker as he begins to fade away. It's been a while since he's felt this, the feeling of dying. But wait, what's this? Flickering lights? Jian's eyes suddenly fly open. Staring back at him is the woman who looked like his mother, and a nurse. Jian, with his head bandaged and hair shaved off, is at a complete loss. He sits up abruptly, clearly startled. The nurse kindly suggests taking it easy. He's just had surgery, and post-op isn't fun. Surgery? Jian echoes, touching the bandage cautiously. The nurse explains briefly. They couldn't ID him, so they couldn't get a guardian's signature. But the surgery was urgent, so they went ahead with it. What's your name? The nurse asks, prompting a blank stare from Jian. His name? Lost somewhere in a fog of time and confusion. Jian pauses, thinking hard. He actually hasn't used his name in decades. Let me ponder for a moment, he says with a weird accent. The woman is surprised that he has a southern accent. He sits in silence as he rummages around in his memory. Then he remembers someone familiar, with a warm smile. I remember, he finally exclaims. He takes a deep breath, finding a fragment of himself he'd misplaced. My name is Li Jian. A doctor has now come in to assess Jian. So Li Jian, age unknown, address unknown, and he has memory issues? The doctor asks. He declares that it's going to be a problem. The woman doesn't look happy to hear this. Fast forward 3 months later, she's now in a police station. They've searched high and low, even among older folks, but can't find a match for his identity. Not even the faintest fingerprint trail. They couldn't find him on CCTV either. The woman has heard all this before and just wants to know how they intend to handle the issue. They've never seen a situation like this before. There's a high chance he might be an undocumented alien. The woman only wants answers. The officer smiles awkwardly, saying that having a guardian would make things easier. A guardian. The woman mulls over the idea carefully. Then, a lightbulb moment. A guardian! Back at the hospital, someone's calling out for Li Jian's guardian. Jian sneaks a sideward glance. He nudges the woman. Isn't she calling ya? She approaches the counter grudgingly. She signs the form which gives her guardianship over Jian. She pauses, then turns to look at him. Their eyes meet for a second. Does she feel some kind of connection with him? Rizu and Jain leave the hospital. Jain stares at Rizu and asks why she's looking a bit blue. She stares for a second, and deflects, insisting again that it was the rock's fault, and he shouldn't feel indebted to her. Jain asks why she keeps repeating stuff like that. Rizu can't answer, but instead steps closer. She tells him that she put his age as 24 in his documents. The younger the better, right? With a threatening glare, she says that she's older than him, at 34. But did she just say that younger was better? Jain counters. Rizu stares at him darkly, cursing him in her mind. Anyway, Rizu reminds him to speak formally to her because she's older. Jain answers, okay, whatever. She reminds him again to speak to her respectfully because she's way older than him. Jain comes back with an absolutely deadpan face, because he's literally a 3.5 billion years old now. Finally, they move on, with Rizu offering him a job until his memory somehow returns. She suddenly stops. Jain has taken her hand and is holding it. What the heck? She yells, swatting his hand away. She scolds him about taking someone's hand without permission. Why not? He asks innocently. Rizu's had it up to here with this ridiculousness. She desperately runs through the basics of obtaining consent. Once done, Jain straightforwardly asks, "Can I hold your hand?" She's not entirely sure how she's ended up in this spot. "Say it politely," she requests. "May I please hold your hand?" Jain asks. Rizu takes his hand. "Come on." She pulls him. He stares at it for a moment. Suddenly, there's a crackle, and there's a vague memory of a child and his mom in a field of flowers. There's an emotional rush, and before he knows it, he's crying. Tears quietly roll down his cheek. Rizu is taken aback, asking why on earth he's crying. Jain himself seems confused. "I don't have a clue why," Jain admits. Meanwhile, in a few steps away from them, a planter box of vibrant yellow daisies were glowing brightly. The same kinds that were growing in the field he used to walk through with his mom. Your likes help Benza make more juicy content. Go on and hit that bell icon. Peace, send him out.